Study hard, graduate, get a job, make an impact. You can be a doctor, artist, diplomat, make an impact. Protest, volunteer, donate, make an impact. Impact is on our minds. As a student, I hear this word all the time, and it seems to have a different meaning to everyone. So I talked to LSA faculty and staff to deconstruct this idea. What does impact mean to you?
I think we use this word like impact in sort of this colloquial way now to really mean positive impact. But every choice that we're making all the time is making some sort of impact. For me, I didn't really even think about what would my impact be because I was just trying to get through the next thing. I was getting through the next assignment. For a long time, your North Star is just getting to the university. Then you get to the university and you don't really have a clear North Star anymore. What do you believe? I think this is something that most people never ask themselves, which is why it's so confusing to go out then and try to figure out what do I want to work on? Because I don't actually have this sense of what I believe is really important or what the areas are that I can be really effective.
So we can start by looking inward. What do I believe? Professor Lakeisha Simmons encourages us to look further into the past.
One of the things that's really important is to study people who've made big changes and think about the ways in which they started. And a lot of times they didn't start where they ended up. Some of these people started so small and learned from the people before them and got help from others and then ended up where they were. But there's so much that we can learn historically. And if we think about like social change, the strategies that activists use, the ways in which those social movements started up and the way that they broke down can teach us a lot about different ways that we can think about making an impact.
But how does purpose align with career? Investigative journalist Will Potter's sense of purpose didn't always align with what he did for work.
You don't have to have your career meeting every need you have in your life. I've had plenty of day jobs over the years as I was writing books and doing, working on documentaries, but there are still avenues to make a difference.
Why is it important for people to establish a guiding motivation in life?
Unless you have that, what I would call that internal compass, that moral compass, some sense of self, then if you don't have it, you're going to be more easily manipulated. But you have to really cultivate that courage, especially when you're facing difficult decisions like coming out of undergrad. That pressure is on, right? Everybody's asking, what are you going to do next? Usually it's in the form of what job you have, but that's a really narrow interpretation of purpose. And most of the time, I think that's too limiting.
So how do we reframe our concept of what counts as impact? I talked to biology professor Megan Duffy about ways to look at impact differently.
My father was a New York City firefighter, my mother's a nurse, and so they have these very obvious impacts, and that's the sort of careers everyone in my family had. But then now I realize I can have impact in all these other ways that I just didn't even imagine when I was starting college. So I can try to teach intro bio in a way that's exciting and welcoming and inclusive, and that can have a really big impact. I've been doing a lot of work this year related to student mental health. If I could change some policies at the university in a way that improves student mental health, that would be impact. Because I think impact can happen in so many different ways and at so many different scales. And it's also often so hard to measure.
I found myself wondering why I struggled to choose a path. I talked to Professor Adumbi about how activism is changing in our new global world.
Social media is changing the ways in which we interact globally. But the question will be, what are the unintended consequences of this? A lot of people will make the wrong assumption that with social media, organizing makes the life of activists very easy. There is a lot of traffic on social media. And when there is a lot of traffic, you hardly know which issue you want to pay attention to. It's not just about posting stuff on social media, but it's also about using social media to organize. You need to be able to move from social media to real spaces.
So if I want to be effective in real-world activism, what does it take to make a difference?
I think that one of the things that we tend to forget when we think about social change work is that it's not all glamorous. Getting to a place where really important life-changing things are happening usually has to do with a few big key ideas and a whole lot of grunt work underneath.
Professor Ashley Lucas is the director of the Prison Creative Arts Project. Each year they organize an exhibit of art for Michigan prisoners.
So the gallery exhibition that you see here today is pretty big and flashy, and there's a lot of stuff going on that's very visible to the public, but underneath that, we made trips to every one of the 26 Michigan Department of Corrections facilities in the state. If you want to help the movement, sometimes you don't have to be the figurehead, you don't have to be the person out in front of it, you don't have to be doing something flashy or even something fun. You can do a lot of really important work by making sure that the things that need to happen get done so that the rest of the work can happen smoothly and well.
The choices we make about how we live our lives matter. But we don't have to be paralyzed by these decisions. We need to look hard at who we are and what matters to us, engage in our communities, and be prepared to put in hard work to reach our goals. So what are our first steps? How do we move forward on the path to making an impact?
You don't have to figure out the one perfect path through life when you're 20. It matters a lot to look for the little things that you can do.
How can we move in this world in a way that even though the world is unjust, that we can make ethical choices? Taking care of yourself and taking care of your community is part of changing the world.
You want to have your head and your heart and your hands all in some kind of alignment. If you don't, that's where that dissatisfaction comes from. Even if it's engaging your mind and you're active, but it's not in line with your heart and that's really pulling you in a different direction, something's got to give.
You are the person who's going to have to live this life. So you need to choose a life that you can live with. So don't be scared off by the fact that there's a serious path ahead of you to get towards the things that you might want. I think you have to really dive in and think about your life holistically, which can be really hard for young folks in particular.
For me, I see social activism as a training platform for leadership. Leadership means your ability to organize. Leadership also means your ability to listen to others while people are listening to you.
Start doing things today. Figure out what is something I can do by Friday. I'm not saying you have to do something massive by Friday, but can you do something? You know, if you see something in the world that could be changed, ask yourself, why can't I be the one to help change it?